Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all in today's webinar session. My name is Ayman Chaudhary, and I am the Head of Secretariat of Global Compact Network Canada. We are the Canadian chapter of the United Nations Global Compact. For those who are not familiar with the UN Global Compact, it is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with more than 13,000 businesses globally committed to its 10 sustainability principles around the four thematic pillars of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. Our role is to support businesses for responsible business conduct by applying those 10 principles and to guide them to utilize the Sustainable Development Goals, in short SDGs, framework for improved sustainability commitment. If your business is headquartered in Canada or you have a subsidiary office in Canada and you are keen to explore opportunities to strengthen your sustainability commitment, we are here to give you full support. Please visit our website, globalcompact.ca, to learn more. The UN Global Compact's 10 principles were created to help businesses embrace, support, and build sustainability into their core strategic and operational functions. With the pandemic into its second year, businesses now more than ever need to strengthen their commitment towards human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, which will help ensure a sustainable economic recovery. With COVID-19 undoing some of the progresses that has been made in these key areas, how can Canadian businesses employ the 10 principles to realign their commitments, goals, and accelerate progress for responsible business conduct in the decade of action? This 5-part webinar series titled as Paving the Way for Responsible Business Conduct in the Decade of Action aims at responding to this big question. Today is the third session of this webinar series, and our focus topic for today's discussion is environment. The recording of the previous 2 sessions on human rights and labor can be found on our website, and I would encourage you to listen to those webinars to find inspiration for your business. Today, we face a climate emergency with irreversible impacts for people and the natural system that sustain us. More and more companies are prioritizing corporate climate action and raising ambition in line with climate science. In the lead up to COP26 in November 2021, businesses must demonstrate that the world is on a credible path to net zero emissions. To reach the goals of the Paris Agreement and halve the global emissions by 2030, we will need corporate leaders and government to work together and stakeholders everywhere to accelerate climate action. Derived from the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, the environment is one of the 4 pillars of UN Global Compact's 10 principles. This principles-based approach to businesses encourage organizations to support a precautionary approach to environmental challenges, undertaking initiatives to promote greater environmental responsibility, and encourage the development and diffusion of environmentally friendly technologies. Today, we are going to discuss how Canadian companies have leveraged sustainable business models and practices to define challenges, implement solutions, and measure outcomes to further drive accelerated corporate climate action. And for these very important discussions, we have a fantastic line of panelists today, including Catherine Thibault, the Director of Public Affairs and Global Communication at CAE, Leela Kharbasi, Chief Programs at UN Global Compact, Rachel Bannon-Godfrey, Senior Principal Sustainability Discipline Leader at Stantec Buildings, and William Surplice, President and Founder of Brooklyn Consulting. So without further ado, let's get into today's discussion. To set up the stage for today's discussion, I would like to first ask Leela to shed some lights on what are the UN Global Compact's priorities when it comes to the environment and responsible business conduct, and how have those priorities probably have evolved in the light of COVID-19?
Thank you so much, Ayman, and nice to see you all. Thank you for the invitation to be on the panel, and congratulations to Global Compact Canada for all the fantastic work that you're doing to promote the UN Global Compact. I am the Chief of Programs of the UN Global Compact, and my portfolio covers our work around the 10 principles are on environment, but also on human rights, on labor rights, and on anti-corruption. In terms of our priorities, when it comes to the environment, very clearly we have a big focus on climate change and the role of business We are in the middle of an emergency with the climate crisis. It can be compared in many ways to the COVID crisis. And we're, just learning from the major disruption that COVID has caused. And we need to anticipate that with what we know of science, there will be disruptions that will be caused due to climate, extreme weather events, more migration, basically issues that would also affect those that are the most vulnerable on the planet. It would also affect very much the economy, and it requires a major transformation from all parts of the economy, mainly the energy sector, but not only. It's a question of rethinking our long-term risks. And we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic that this perception of risks has changed. And many more companies have been inclined to actually join the Global Compact, where for Q1 of 2021, plus 24% in terms of participation year on year. And many companies have also reached out to us to understand what they can do about potential future risks on climate and how to set targets that are appropriate to limit those risks. And we do this through the Science-Based Target Initiative, which we're part of. And we've seen a very big increase also in the number of companies that have joined Science-Based Target since the beginning of the pandemic. And the purpose of all of this is to work together to find ways to limit the increase of temperature by no more than 1.5 degree as a follow-up to the Paris Agreement and to the latest science from the IPCC. We already have reached an average warming of 1 degree, and we see the effects of that with wildfires, with droughts, with floods. And we are heading towards, 3.5, 4 degrees of warming, which is absolutely, catastrophic for the planet. So all efforts should be on preventing that. And our other priorities also when it comes to the environment relate very much to the issue of water stewardship, to the protection of our ocean and nature. And all of these elements are also very much linked to the climate crisis. So I'll stop here and I can talk more about that later.
Thanks, Lila. Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Lila, for highlighting the global priorities and challenges and for showcasing how UN Global Compact is playing a leadership role in convening the business together to work on this very critical issue. Next, I think we have some questions for Catherine, Rachel, and Bill as well in terms of addressing the environmental challenges. But before going to the panelists, I would like to get the pulse of our audience today on this topic. I would kindly request you to go to slido.com, slido.com, from your PC or your phone and enter the room number R717 to participate in this quick activity. Okay, the information that you can see on the slide, please follow that information. And we have a quick question for you. Steve, if you can play the first question. Okay, so what precautions does your company take when addressing environmental challenges? Let's see how our audience respond to this question. We will spend roughly around 30 seconds for this question and to get your pulse. So please respond as soon as you can. And your response is going to help our speakers to understand the pulse, and maybe they will be able to respond back to your preferences as well when they're responding to our questions. So far, we are seeing that risk assessment and risk management are two precautions that companies are taking when addressing environmental challenges. Communication is lacking a little bit. Okay, another 5 seconds, then we will be closing the poll. Great, so we can see that risk management is definitely regarded as one of the top priorities in terms of addressing environmental challenges, then risk assessment, but the communication is still not that of a priority. And at least one or two in the audience are still unsure like how this can be, the precautionary measures can be used. So the panelists, you are also looking at the responses today. So if you want to address the responses in your remarks, that would be great. But now we have Catherine, Bill, and Rachel, and I have a question for all three of you, but I'm gonna start with Catherine first. So my question to you is the same one, like what precautions and or actions do you think like you are taking when addressing environmental challenges within your organization? Also, it would be great if you can highlight what has given you the greatest challenge and how did you approach that?
Well, thank you. So thank you for inviting me. And first, I'll start by introducing CAE for those who may not be familiar with the company. So CAE is a high technology company that provides training solutions in civil aviation, defense and security, and healthcare. So we train civil pilots, defense forces, and healthcare professionals to conduct their operations safely, mostly through simulation. So from the outset, our business model does contribute not only to the safety of the operations in these sectors, but also it helps avoid the carbon emissions. For example, today, all commercial pilots, they receive almost all of their training in a flight simulator. So the first time that they actually fly a real aircraft, it's with passengers at the back. So and with an experienced pilot on their side, so don't worry, they have some help. So we estimate that all the training flights that are happening in a simulator instead of a real aircraft, they represent at least 5 million of tons of CO2 that are avoided each year. So now that I gave you a bit of background on CAE, I'll answer your question on how we address environmental challenges. So this year, we cover the risk communication and the risk assessment and risk management as well. I think there are areas where companies have different levels of maturity, but these are functions and stakes that companies take seriously, definitely more and more. Now that we know all the risks that we're facing, even more this year than we did last year. But all that to say that the challenge that we undertook recently was to become carbon neutral. We're the first Canadian aerospace company to become carbon neutral, so we're very proud of that. We first achieved this by continuing our ongoing energy reduction initiatives, and for the emissions that we could not avoid, we purchased the renewable energy certificates, and we invested in reliable green projects to compensate for our emissions through carbon offsets. For us, the carbon offsetting is an interim measure. It's not the end of the road, and it helps us compensate the emissions that we can't eliminate. We really see this as a built-in incentive to reduce our emissions at the source. So we don't have to continuously invest large amounts of money in offsets year after year. So it's a nice motivation for us to continue innovating to reduce our footprint. And one of our main projects on that front is the development of an electric aircraft with other industry partners. So we'd like to use this aircraft for the live flight training that we perform in our academies, because we do have some flight schools using around 200 small aircraft to train cadets who are at the very beginning of their training. So that's something we really care about. We want to, use some electric aircraft to perform this training. And we also have contracts that were announced recently to collaborate in the development of new all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which we call eVTOL. So our teams are really passionate about these projects, and we think it's going to really help with innovation working towards climate change. We also continue to increase the energy efficiency of our buildings. We try to reduce the fuel that we use and business travel as well. And we also invest in our technology, so our full flight simulators and other devices to make them more energy efficient, so that also helps our customers reduce their own footprint. And to answer your question about what was our main challenge, so if we relate to our carbon neutrality journey, the challenge was really that we had picked most of the low-hanging fruits already. So in order to find ways to reduce our consumption, we really have to be increasingly creative and innovative. So the quick fix we're all done. So we really need to work harder to reduce our footprint. And another challenge that we faced in this journey is to mobilize resources and collect data from 160 sites around the world. I think it's a pain point for most global companies to have multiple sites to mobilize. So I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Catherine, for providing those details on your approach and challenges. Next, let's go to Bill. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, and thanks for the invite, and congratulations on the growth. It's great to see that other businesses are joining the compact. It is one vehicle where businesses can come together to work on these challenges that we have. So congratulations for that. I'll give you, real brief on Brooklyn. We're a purpose-driven, pure play management consulting company. We focus on improving our clients' productivity and improving growth at our clients. And it's a business that involves a lot of travel. So for us, the challenge, that we have is to reduce the footprint when a client expects us to show up on site, right? The COVID situation has given us some practice at that, I would say, so we're quite shocked by the disruption that COVID had, and it forced us, even though prior to this, we were trying to get our consultants and our clients to say, we don't have to be on site all the time. We can work from an office that's not on site. But this has kind of forced it, and we see that it's going to be a very positive for us, in the future from that perspective, right? We early on decided that we would not have a permanent office. So we don't have any footprint from that perspective. Really, our business impacts carbon in our travel to and from our clients. So we've committed, and we're in advanced standing. We've made our commitment to be carbon neutral as well. And bit of a challenge to calculate, how many trees we need to purchase to offset, because it will be offset. That we'll have to do, but we've committed to do that. I think that's important. Everybody has to make even if we're just a small company, to commit to be carbon neutral, I think is a big step. So, that's one of the things. But where we started with our team was through education, educating our team on what it is that the Global Compact is, and getting them involved. So it's not just these SDGs that we're talking, it's not just carbon and climate that we're talking about. We're very involved, let's say, with the Canadian Council on Aboriginal Businesses, and inclusion is a big part of what we're about. But targeting climate change, we provide services with our clients that calculates GHG emissions. We build return on investment business cases for capital investment, and then we may find opportunities to get government support for those initiatives when the ROI, isn't justified. Let's say, just on the pure sense, but there are opportunities to get some government support. So we help our clients in that sense as well. I think that's okay.
That was wonderful, Bill. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective and for sharing your approaches and how you're approaching this whole very critical issue. Next, we're going to move to Rachel. Let's hear from her.
Great, thank you, Ayman. And I'll echo what Bill said about, it's great news to hear about the increase in folks joining up for the Global Compact. So Stantec, we are a global multidisciplinary architecture and engineering firm. We're headquartered in Canada. I've been working for many decades in Canada. We also have offices in about 350 locations around the world, 22,000 people working across the globe on a whole variety of, as I said, planning, architecture, engineering projects. So when we talk about our environmental impact, we have a corporate sustainability team that works very hard to manage our operational impact and looking at how to make progress towards our net zero carbon goals. And they do a fabulous job of keeping the momentum and the volume of messaging internally as an organization about everything that we do and how that relates back to, frankly, back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. When we talk about a matter of scale, the environmental impact of our own offices, that is minor in comparison to the impact of the projects that we work on at any one time. We carry out, as I said, planning, architecture, and engineering work across all sectors, all markets, and all scales, from a single building design and engineering of a single building or a single tenant space, all the way up to major infrastructure, ecosystems, and community planning. Every project we send out in the world touches on every opportunity and challenge inherent in the environmental, social, governance lenses. And the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of what we do on our projects and how we consult to our clients, we also can take that back to our own organization and our own operations as well. So I lead our carbon impact team within Stantec Buildings and the sustainability leader. So if I kind of give an example from the building sector, we have, when every project starts, we have a dedicated team of consultants that will hold workshops and visioning sessions and have conversations with our clients to understand exactly what sustainability and resiliency means in the context of that particular project for that client's organization, and most importantly, for the community that project is going to be in. And again, this is something that we also apply to our own business. Because particularly when we talk about resiliency, it's so important to be very specific. What are the key performance indicators that we're going to apply to this particular situation? How are we going to measure success? How are we going? Because your resiliency it's a continuum, right? You don't just meet it one day and then you're done. So it's really important to get everybody on the same page from the very beginning. What is the most important thing that we can do here in this particular context? And so that's what we do. And greatest challenges, I think there's two that initially came to my mind. One is helping people understand that again, from the building's perspective, every building counts. Every asset that you own as an organization counts. Every single design decision, operational decision about that particular asset, whether it's that one office space in one location, or it's that your campus in another location. Every single decision you make does impact a community, either the one at that location or upstream or downstream. Your decision on, well, obviously the efficiency of the building, or the materials that you're putting that has an impact on everybody, again, upstream, downstream, or at that particular site. Particularly, precautionary principles applying. If when we're looking at healthy material selection or energy efficiency, just do the right thing. And so the challenge there is helping our clients understand you don't need a huge portfolio of assets to make an impact. To make a positive impact. You don't need to be working at massive scale. If you have an office, if you have employees, if you are sending somebody in a car from one location to another, just making sure that informed decisions are guiding you at every time, at every moment. And this requires, we like to talk about systems thinking, right? Again, it's looking at all the different nodes and all the different relationships and all the components that you impact directly, but also indirectly through your supply chain, or the supply chain of the materials that you're specifying, or the fuel source that your building is connected to. And then the last challenge is not the last one, but the last one I'm going to mention. There are many challenges. And the other challenge is helping our clients understand the most effective actions to do first. Right. So it's not about chasing that shiny technology or just looking at the latest financial models for carbon offsets and so on. Those are both, yes, important, but most of the time it's about starting with fundamental principles that have been in place in society for millennia. So fundamental engineering principles, fundamental architecture and design principles, making sure you're doing everything you can to leverage nature and physics first. And this, again, I'm speaking from the perspective of an architecture and engineering firm, but the same thing applies to organizations that are thinking about their real estate assets. Start with the fundamentals, because when you start with technology, that's what drives the cost of solutions up. That's what gives mitigation and adaptation to climate change a bad rap, right? Don't start with the technology, start with the fundamentals. Design with climate, design with nature, design with building science. Start there and then progress from there.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I know Bill has touched a little bit on that, on this question that I would like to ask to both Rachel and Catherine. Like, how has the pandemic changed the way business consider and analyze environmental protection? Like, I'm pretty sure like a lot of disruptions has already happened, but what are the 2 or 3 points that you would like to highlight? Like, what are the main changes that has happened? Let's start with Catherine.
Well, I think yes, there are changes associated with the pandemic. So post pandemic, or when we think about the recovery, one thing that is very top of mind these days in the aerospace industry is the green recovery of the sector post COVID. So we really see this as a real movement to accelerate the decarbonization of the industry. And we see more and more collaboration projects with the various industry partners to accelerate the climate action. And another thing that did emerge from the pandemic is the new work methodologies that were developed during the confinement to support clients remotely, that I think are going to be sustained post-pandemic as well. So, the situation forced us all to be very creative to support our customers, maintain our operations, and some of the creative workarounds that we developed are there to stay, and they'll help avoid a lot of emissions, I believe. So, we now execute some work remotely, some operations that we really thought that were absolutely necessary to do in person. Well, I think the pandemic helped in opening minds on, how we execute and challenge the status quo on how we execute our mandates.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Rachel, your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, and apologies, I see some comments that my sound is bad. I was just looking around for a headset. So what we see is it's not so much impact on environmental protections, but we've seen a much greater understanding of the relationship between what is happening to the environment and how our business operates. So, at a general level, companies who had done scenario planning probably had a pandemic event in their scenario planning, but maybe didn't think it would ever happen, and then it did. And we saw what a global shutdown looked like. We saw vulnerabilities in supply chains that we might not have considered before. We saw what it looks like when air travel is curtailed and people aren't in offices. So, any goals that companies might have had, and Catherine, you touched on this, any goals company might have had about reducing travel, minimizing real estate, that was probably, well, maybe we'll get to that in the next X years. Suddenly, that was quickly put to the test. And suddenly people weren't traveling and people weren't in offices. And from what I hear, a number of companies found that it was feasible. I know us at Stantec, we had goals for minimizing travel and reducing our office footprint. And suddenly those goals were accelerated. And it's working very well, and it's helped us to accelerate our progress towards our carbon neutral goals. And then at a very specific level, the pandemic really shone a spotlight on air quality. In the sustainability and mechanical engineering fields, we've been talking about the importance of air quality for years, particularly in locations in Southeast Asia or in the Pacific Northwest or Colorado during wildfire season. And suddenly the world was paying more attention to air quality, right? Is the air that we're breathing in buildings, is it safe from the perspective of infection control? And then as buildings sat vacant for many months and were starting to be occupied again, is the filtration system still working? But definitely with the pandemic, there was a worldwide attention on air quality. And there's a direct link between air quality and health, air quality and cognitive functioning. And yes, the pandemic was the driver for that attention, but climate change is significantly impacting air quality around the world. So we're seeing a lot of interest from our clients now in design strategies that can improve indoor air quality in buildings. How do we work with, I mentioned wildfire season or increased pollution. How do we work in those locations to make sure that we're healthy? And how do we improve indoor air quality? And that's good for everybody. So that was, right, from our perspective, the pandemic did change the way businesses are looking at environmental indicators, physical indicators.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that detail, kind of highlighting like how the pandemic has made some core changes there. Before we ask our next question to the panelists, I'd like to again move to our second activity, like again, very quick activity for the audience. If you again, please go to Slido and type the room number there. We have the second question there ready for you. And the question I have for you is, where do you believe your company could place more effort in terms of improving the business model towards environmental friendly approaches? So we have outlined some options here. You can certainly identify more than one option, but wherever you think like there is an opportunity for you to improve your overall activity, please help us identify those. Again, we're going to spend around 30 to 40 seconds to get the responses from our audience on this question. And again, this is going to help our panelists to shape their responses. So I would kindly ask you to participate in this activity. So far, it's looking like improving the sustainability targets and indicators could be one of the most improvement effort. Okay, that moved to second position now. So measuring, tracking, and communicating progress. So those are almost fighting at the top to get the #1 priority. Okay, so we're gonna run it for another 5 seconds, then we're gonna close the poll. So far, it's looking like developing the sustainability targets and indicators, and also measuring and tracking and communicating the progress are two of the key priorities that companies are looking at in terms of improving their efforts. With that in mind, looking at that stat there, I'm now going to go back to our panelists and going to ask them, what are your thoughts on this result from this audience engagement? And what are some steps you think business can take to reconsider their existing business models for a more environmentally friendly approach? And let's start with Bill this time.
It's almost like this is a question that was set up for me specifically, but it wasn't, because those are things that we actually work with our clients to do, right? To establish those targets scientifically and to put together systems that allow them to be able to track their progress. I think earlier, Catherine talked about continuous improvement or having systems, and you know, this ties right into it. and it's very logical. Most people understand it. There is effort to do it. And but at the end of the day, the results are showing in these systems, and people are able to celebrate improvements and things of that nature. So in anything, it's like Drucker said, right? You need to measure it, to manage it properly, and you got to have those targets, and you got to have those systems in place. So thank you. I can keep talking. I'm trying.
Sorry, I was muted. Catherine, let's hear from you on that question.
Yeah, it seems like we're all very.
Yeah. So.
Oh, who did you want to call on?
Sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
I think I was muted. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I had a little bit of mic issue here. Catherine, can you respond to that question, please, now?
Yeah, so I agree with Bill's comments, and I think the companies they must approach environmental issues and any ESG issues like any other strategic decisions. The ESG roadmap of a company needs to be aligned with its mission, the vision, values, and integrated with the business strategy overall. So, if the stars are not aligned, chances are the plans are not going to stick for the long term. So really, everything has to be coherent with who you are as a business. And I'm not surprised with the results. It's difficult for companies to start really reporting and having KPIs on those matters. And I think slowly but surely, companies are gaining maturity and knowledge in that field. So and different frameworks do help with that, but I'm not surprised it's a challenge for most companies. I think a great way to identify what actually needs to be considered in a business model is making a climate change risk assessment. So seeing the gaps really helps making informed decisions and setting KPIs for a business.
Wonderful. Thanks, Catherine. Let's hear from Leila on that same question.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that we all seem to be very aligned, both in terms of the panelists and the people in the audience, around the need to set targets as the most efficient way to address our environmental issues. It's also one of the key sort of priority for the UN Global Compact. We work very closely with the Science-Based Target Initiative. So looking at what science requires in terms of projections and applying that to individual businesses according to their sector and to the size of the company, and helping companies set their target in a way that we know is sufficient to be compatible with what the science says is needed. So essentially to keep the increase of global temperature below 1.5 degree. There are already 600 companies that have committed to have their targets aligned with this 1.5 degree target. It's remarkable. It's actually the size of all of the emissions in China. What's remarkable about science-based target is that you can verify those targets. There is a very solid, robust methodology behind it that enables you to not only verify but also compare the data. We're actually releasing a report today that looks at the stock indexes of all G7 countries, and there are temperature scores that are assigned to the stock indices. Canada is also, of course, part of the research, and it basically shows that we're on a track to achieve near about 3 degree warming if we continue with the same level of of targets and the same level of investments in those stock markets. So there's a whole study and methodology behind it. It focuses on the G7 countries because this is where nearly 50% of the emissions are coming from, and it's timely now with the G7 meeting this weekend, and it really shows that none of the G7 indices are aligned with the Paris Agreement, which is yet another alarming sign. In terms of targets for other environmental matters, there are efforts to replicate what we've done with carbon on other metrics such as water, biodiversity, forests, land, ocean, and this is done also through a coalition of organizations, scientists, and think tanks, and environmental organizations. It's called the Science-Based Target Network, and we're not at a stage yet where we can validate the targets with approved methodologies, but we will be there relatively soon, about a year of research to be done, so that those targets that are put forward by individual entities can be validated by the environmental organizations.
Thank you so much, Leila, for highlighting that report. Actually, I got to see that press release this morning came out from UN Global Compact, and the results are really shocking. Like, none of the major G7 stock indexes are currently on the 2.2 degrees Celsius pathway. And more scaring than is that 4 of the 7 indexes are on the dangerous temperature pathway of 3 degrees Celsius or above. That's like, so I'm glad that even Global Compact is already raising awareness on this very critical issue. And thanks for all the work that's coming out from you and Global Compact. And Canada being a part of that G7 indexes, certainly there is a lot that the businesses must do and should do to improve that overall performance on that particular indexes. Thanks for bringing that up. Rachel, let's hear from you on that same question.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I think everybody else answered, gave brilliant answers to that. The one thing I will add is when we talk about setting sustainability targets and indicators, is really bringing in that human element. And I think that was one of the fabulous things that the Sustainable Development Goals did, was when they took sustainability and kind of spread it over these 17 targets that really address every part of human health and livelihood. And so a good way for businesses to do that, to bring in that very human element to setting those targets, is to obviously bring diverse voices to the table when you're having conversations about what should the targets be for your particular organization. Where can we have the most impact? We have a developing professionals group that is very active in sustainability and in discussions like that, and also think about the specific communities that the different organizations are in. So in addition to what everyone else said, I wanted to kind of put that focus on the very that social aspect of sustainability and how it can impact different communities. And the way to do that is bring those diverse voices to the table in your organization.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your thoughts on that question. I have one final question for our panelists today, but before going to that, I have one third and final activity for our audience. If you again go to Slido, please, and type that room number 717, R717. So the final question we have for our audience today is that what environmentally friendly technologies do you think will be most impactful in the future? So we have provided some list here. So from this list of 4, whatever you think gonna have the highest impact, please help us identify that. And I'm pretty sure the panelists are also looking at the responses here from the audience. So on my next question, if you can highlight what are your understanding on this responses from the audience, that'd be wonderful. Because my next question is to you is almost on the same topic. We're gonna run the poll for another 10 seconds. Let's try to see if we can get some more responses. Okay, so let's close the poll here. According to the audience who have participated in the survey, the most impactful environmentally friendly technologies that we're going to see in the future is going to be waste to energy. And there are a lot of improvements that are already happening in that field. AI for recycling and waste management, electric vehicles are all getting importance. I'm a little surprised to see that self-sufficient buildings is not like at least this few number of audience are not looking as one of the impactful technology, but the prospect of this technology is actually huge. If we are actually looking at high impact changes in this environmental field, I think self-sufficient building is going to bring a big change if that can be done in the correct way. But I'm pretty sure we're going to hear more from our panelists today. So I'm going to go back to our panelists, Catherine, Bill, and Rachel. Leela, I'm going to go back to after this question to Bill, Rachel, and Catherine. But my question to those three, how does your company make information available to stakeholders that illustrates the improved performance and benefits of using environmentally sound technologies? Let's start with Catherine this time.
I'll start by saying that I'm glad to see artificial intelligence in the solutions, because I think it's a very powerful tool that can help us all work smarter through climate action. So very happy to see that people believe it's promising. To answer your question, we over the past years have increased our disclosures to provide more data to our stakeholders, and they increasingly pay attention to our reporting in terms of ESG. As I said in the beginning, by offering training solutions on simulators, I mean, we've been contributing to the decarbonization of the aerospace industry. We did develop a calculation methodology this year to really calculate how we help avoid emissions. So that in itself already speaks volumes to everybody, but for our customers as well. And for our customers, it's been clear that our technologies in simulation, they don't only avoid emissions, but they also, it makes them more efficient and makes them save a lot of money. It's definitely the safest and the most cost-efficient way to train. There's a lot of environmental and societal benefits to our business that cannot be quantified per se, but we still lay them out in our reporting. And we now include in our reporting TCFD, SASB, and GRI indexes. So we try to add on each year and make more information available to our stakeholders. This year we include references to SDGs, so it's very helpful to look at our materiality issues through the lens of the SDGs, and it really helps us evolve our roadmap. So a really great tool for companies, and definitely we're happy to be able to leverage it this year. I just want to close by saying that we really see more interest for all ESG matters from investors, customers, our current employees, our future talent that we're trying to attract. They're all really keen on knowing what CAE does for the environment and who CAE is as a corporate citizen. So definitely more interest than there was just 5 years ago. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep myself muted. Thanks, Catherine, for sharing your point of view on that. Let's hear from Bill on that question.
I think quick on how we communicate. I mean, we give a commitment on progress, on an annual basis. We're advanced standing with the UN Global Compact. So at a high level, I mean, that's what we do, and we measure lots of things, right? So that's our nature. But I think I'd almost like to go back to that question, that the answers to the questions, and just give a little bit of my thoughts on that, because it was almost disappointing to see everybody excited about making energy from waste, in that, not that it's not a good thing, because we've worked with, sawmills to build business cases to build biomass, but we'd like to see reduction in waste, okay, as a target. But yes, it is good to use that stuff to produce energy. And then flipping down, a little disappointed to see the self-sustaining business or buildings not being higher up, because I agree with you, and I think that there's a lot of evidence that says that buildings generate a lot of the emissions that are out there. So I think, and we've got thoughts on that. I mean, why doesn't every house have solar panels on the top, and why don't we have funding for initiatives like that? And guess what, here in Canada it seems like they're going to start to do that. So nice to see that type of thing. On the electric vehicles, just a real short story. I mean, we were working with a client on a business case for electric vehicles in their fleet. They were it's a very significant business. I'm not going to identify the business, but on electric transferring to electric vehicles, they couldn't buy them. They couldn't source enough to be able to make up their requirements, so they deferred till next year. So we need to see a lot of progress on things like that. I'm very happy to see Ford's commitment and hopefully General Motors' commitment. We'll see here in Oshawa, where I'm from, to build electric vehicles here, but that's going to be a big driver for change in the future as well. So I'm not sure whether I'm off your question there, but that other question seemed, the answer just struck me that way.
Certainly your response was to the point, and thanks for sharing your thoughts on audience engagement survey and explaining how best we can use the technologies to improve our overall climate action. Rachel, your final thoughts on that question?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So we make information available to stakeholders through our annual sustainability report. We do internal tracking of our projects against the SDGs. Catherine, you mentioned that as well. We collect performance metrics on our projects and just make sure that we are meeting our own internal goals. And then working with clients, we do a lot of modeling, and that can be anything from a simple Excel spreadsheet all the way up to artificial intelligence and using machine learning and so on to generate different alternatives, or look at the likely greenhouse gas emissions of a particular project over its lifetime. Really, the modeling is key, but it has a range of different levels of sophistication. Sometimes you can get the most useful information out of just a simple spreadsheet as long as the inputs are correct and meaningful. We also, we encourage everyone to set, I've mentioned this many times, set key performance indicators in the context of the impact of your company and your direct and indirect impact, but focusing on not just first cost, right? Not just pure return on investment in terms of dollars, but moving towards from return on investment to value on investment, and looking broader. For example, looking at natural capital, right? Putting a dollar value to the benefits of nature-based solutions for the whole of society, right? The health and well-being benefits, the carbon sequestration benefits, and so on. So really, and I mentioned this before in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, did a nice job of expanding the definition of sustainability in that same way. I think when we're making information available or helping clients with what information they need, really expand the metrics and the ways in which we are measuring success beyond purely just first cost dollars. And just really quickly on the survey that you showed for the buildings, the impact of global greenhouse gas emissions, about 29% of global greenhouse gas emissions are from the energy used in buildings, right? Your heating, your cooling, your lighting, your plug loads. And then another 11% is from the materials that are used to construct your buildings, right? So it's called embodied carbon. It's the energy required to extract the raw materials, deliver them to manufacturing plant, deliver them to site. So if you add those two together, buildings are about 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So yes, definitely an area in which we need to make more progress.
Thanks, Rachel, and for highlighting all this great work. And I would like to also congratulate Stantec for being one of those very few 28 companies from Canada to sign up on that SBTI initiatives. Like Lila mentioned, like globally, we have more than 1,500 companies signed up on SBTIs. But in Canada, for some reason, companies are still learning the process, still looking into the opportunities, like how they can come into it. But so far, the progress is we only have 28 companies from Canada who has officially committed on the Science-Based Target Initiative. So we definitely have some work to do to get more businesses aware of that initiative and see how we can work together to have the company's commitment on that initiative. Lila, I have a question for you. It's almost on the same line, but from you working at the global level with so many different companies and also sitting at SBTI's board, sitting as a chair of SBTI's board, what do you think, like how can companies illustrate the improved performance and benefits of using environmentally friendly technologies to their stakeholders?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of momentum around companies disclosing their performance, measuring their performance around environmental sustainability. There is upcoming regulation also in terms of disclosing your risks that are associated with climate change. Very prominent discussions taking place in the US with the Securities Exchange Commission, but also in Europe with the directive on non-financial reporting that is coming up in the next couple of months, maybe a year or two from now, and the work that standards and frameworks around reporting are doing. So there's basically pressure on all fronts for corporates to be able to measure their performance and be transparent about it. And to disclose it to their investors, to the regulators, to the public at large, to all of the stakeholders of a company. So we think the best channel to do that is through the Science-Based Target Initiative. It is the standard now when it comes to the target setting around CO2 management. And actually more than CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. We were very encouraged to see that there are a lot of companies in the US joining, a growing momentum in Canada, lots of companies in Europe, but also companies coming from emerging markets. We also have a report coming out to introduce that concept more broadly in China. We will have our Leader Summit next week with about 20,000 companies joining online to discuss progress around the areas of work of the Global Compact from all around the world. And at that occasion, there is also a report focusing on the Chinese market and assessing the potential for science-based target there. We have coverage of about 20% of the global economy through science-based target, but we basically need to move to 100%. But we assume that if we move to critical mass, then there will be some sort of domino effect, and that 100% target is going to be achievable faster. So yeah, thanks for sharing the links there. For the Canadian companies, we invite you to look into Science-Based Target, to contact us, to make your pledge. You have, once you make your pledge, you have some time to be able to put everything in place in your company to have your target validated, and you can work with experts to help you make the target a reality. So reach out, and I'm sure Global Compact Canada is going to be there also to support you, make direct connections, and help you with lots of tools and resources that have been put together on that.
Thank you so much, Lila, for all those amazing updates. Yes, I have just shared the link here on the chat box to register for the Leader Summit that Lira just mentioned, and also the link to the science-based targets. And also from our Global Compact Network Canada on October 5th and 6th, we're going to do a Making Global Goals Local Business Canada conference, in short, MGGLB Canada conference. And in that conference, it's going to be a virtual conference, and we're going to have a 1-hour masterclass on how companies can be educated on the science-based target initiative. So there are a lot of confusion, there are a lot of concerns around this SBTIs. So we're going to have a 1-hour masterclass in that conference. So if you're interested in learning more about how your companies can improve your overall climate action or climate commitment, I would encourage that you please do attend that session. We're going to bring in the best experts out there to explain your queries about SBTIs. With that, I think we are almost at the very end of this session. Thank you again to all our wonderful panelists for your time today to respond to these questions and sharing all these great updates. And thank you to our attendees as well for participating in our engagement survey questions. And we look forward to seeing you again on our next webinar, which is going to be on anti-corruption, and the update is going to be on our website. Thank you again for your fruitful participation today. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.